Braddon.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's with great pleasure that I rise here today to talk about the 2016 budget and what it means to my community and the electorate of Braddon. It seems bringing together the 2016 budget, the Coalition made the decision that led to the Tasmanian community saying adios amigos to 3 former Liberal members of Bass, Braddon and Lyons. In so many areas, the Coalition has neglected Tasmanians and demonstrated in their budget just how out of touch they are with the needs of our communities and for regional Tasmania. Whether it's in the critical areas of healthcare, education or job-creating infrastructure, the Coalition just doesn't seem to get it. When you compare the priorities of the Coalition to those of Labor, it is clear why their agenda was overwhelmingly rejected by Tasmanians. The centrepiece of the Coalition's budget was a $50 billion tax cut for big business and the banks based on the false premise of trickle-down economics, which we all know just does not work, and tax cuts for those on higher incomes. But while the Coalition is happy to give these tax cuts, which was $16,715 to those on higher incomes, the average person in Braddon receives $0. What the Coalition does not seem to understand or want to know is the median income for a wage or salary earner in my neck of the woods, according to the latest figures from the ABS, is just $39,887 per annum. And when it comes to funding healthcare, once again the Coalition fails to understand Braddon and Tasmania. Braddon has some of the worst health indicators in the nation. Combined with an ageing population and a disproportionate amount of people receiving a Commonwealth benefit, it becomes clearer why people in Braddon are worried about the cost of health. My electorate has a high degree of chronic disease and poor health outcomes, higher preventable hospitalisations, higher all-cause cancer and all-cause mortality rates compared to the state average. But the ability for people in my electorate to pay more for health care is of concern, and any pressure they face to pay more will only add to poor health indicators for my community. The national average per electorate of people receiving the age pension is 16.36%. In Tasmania, that average is 18.81% of the 5 electorates. In my electorate, the percentage receiving the age pension is 20.67%. The national average per electorate of people in receipt of a healthcare card per electorate is 7.98%. In Tasmania, that figure is 10.29%, and in my electorate of Braddon, the figure is just below that at 10.08%. The adjoining electorate of Lyons has 10.55%, and the electorate of Bass, the figure of 11.89%. So it's little wonder that across all 3 electorates, that a universal healthcare system that does not hit the back pockets of people in our communities is a really high priority. And a message that the self-styled 3 amigos failed completely to understand. And if the Coalition wanted to look further to understand why health is so important to Tasmanians and the people of Braddon, then perhaps they could look at the figures provided by the ABS relating to the number and receipt of a pensioner concession card. These people are not wealthy by any means. Their circumstances as such rely on the Commonwealth support just to get by. The national average is 26.59% of each electorate that receives a pension concession card. The Tasmanian average is 33.7%, and in Braddon the figure is 38.19%. So given the low wage, poor health outcomes and reliance on Commonwealth support, you would think the Coalition would respond in a positive way, but no. The Tasmanian community shook their heads in amazement when it was revealed from figures obtained for the Parliamentary Budget Office that Tasmanian hospitals will suffer a $1.151 billion cut over the next 10 years. In my electorate of Braddon, with the health challenges our community faces, the cut is $153 million over that term. Our local hospitals just can't afford it. Then there's a cruel attack on Medicare, with the GP tax being extended for another 2 years. The Coalition wrongly labelled the campaign Mediscare. But it was not Labor's campaign that scared the community. When you're living on a low income, struggling to put food on the table with a sick member of your family and facing increased costs to see the doctor, you're very scared. Making the sickest and poorest pay more to see a doctor is not fair. And I am proud to have been part of a Labor campaign that put healthcare as a paper issue for the community. But there's more. It seems a coalition just can't get enough of slugging those living in regional communities. The coalition cuts to the health flexible funds have and will continue to hit Braddon hard. The fund that delivered by what is known as TasReach has been cut from 3.9 million to 1.4 million. On the west coast of Tasmania, a community that has been struggling terribly economically and socially, the TasReach cut has had severe impacts. I would like to take a moment to use some quotes from local Mayor Phil Vickers and what these cuts mean to his community. On the 28th of June this year, he said, "The loss of these services places more stress on unwell residents and will also place more pressure on these services in other regions, as West Coasters will now have to travel to attend appointments. There is concern that people will stop seeking help for their medical problems, knowing they cannot access assistance locally." Now, you need to understand that the west coast of Tasmania is an isolated community. It's not something that you can have quick access to any services. It takes many, many hours to travel anywhere. And in winter, sometimes the roads are iced in or snowed out. It's just not health cuts that cause my electorate so much concern. Mr Deputy Speaker, Braddon, along with the rest of Tasmania, has low educational attainment. The proportion of our community who complete Year 12 or gain a tertiary qualification is one of the lowest in Australia. So what is the Coalition's answer to this issue? They defund education by refusing to invest in Years 5 and 6 of Gonski. Implementing the Gonski reforms on time and in full means students outside of the cities will have the same opportunities to learn the skills they need to succeed. I heard some of our opponents, particularly in Tasmania, during the campaign say that we cannot afford Gonski. Well, if you cannot afford to invest in a proven model of education funding that puts the child first and is based on need, which is Gonski, then you shouldn't be in government. In a community with high unemployment, and in particular high youth unemployment, you would think the Coalition would also be prepared to invest in job-creating and economy-growing infrastructure. The hollow words of jobs and growth were nowhere else more hollow than in Tasmania, a state with high unemployment and a slow economy. Mr Deputy Speaker, in March this year, the Tourism Industry Council of Tasmania and the Cradle Coast Authority, which represents the 9 councils of the North West Coast region, launched the $160 million Cradle Mountain Master Plan. Tasmania is experiencing a tourism boom as international and national visitors seek to enjoy some of the best nature-based experiences, combined with some of the most amazing food and wine. But unfortunately, at Cradle Mountain and for northern and northwest Tasmania, this growth is disproportionately favouring southern Tasmania, or what is known as the Mona effect. And I'll explain that. That's the Museum of Old and New Art in Hobart. It's very, very popular with visitors. The issue at Cradle Mountain is its infrastructure, which has not kept pace with the demands of a high-quality experience. Today, people are required to queue for buses, have limited shelter from the elements at Dove Lake, and are not receiving a world-class experience that they expect. For Cradle Mountain to continue to hold its place as one of Australia's iconic destinations, change is needed. The Master Plan seeks to renew Cradle Mountain as Tasmania's iconic destination. The proponents of the Master Plan had it subjected to some of the most rigorous analysis. Deloitte Access Economics Research forecasts the Cradle Mountain redevelopment would have an economic benefit to the Cradle Coast region of up to $29 million per year, based on attracting 59,000 more visitors, translating to 102,000 more visitor nights. Deloitte found the project would create almost 150 full-time jobs in construction and more than 110 full-time jobs in operation in a region that particularly needs sustainable jobs. Market testing and funding models have been completed, and planning and infrastructure work has been assessed, and such is the scope of the work undertaken. Private investors have committed to build a new hotel. There was much anticipation in the lead up to the federal budget that the master plan would receive support. As far back as September last year, the Tasmanian government, a Liberal government, was holding discussions with the federal coalition. No budget announcement was forthcoming. The project did receive strong support from the Tasmanian Liberal government, who committed $15 million in their May budget. I'm so proud to say federal Labor committed $15 million to this project, with a further undertaking to work with the proponents as the project developed. This provided confidence to private investors that this project had the backing of all levels of government and the Tasmanian community. So how did the coalition ultimately respond? On the 23rd of June, former Tourism Minister Senator Colbeck, a senator from and who lived in my town, who knows the area very, very well, and the proponents as well, announced the coalition will support this $160 million project with a paltry $1 million to fund a business case, despite all the work that had previously been undertaken. And I have to say that the coalition was led kicking and screaming to make any announcement on tourism funding or any tourism support for Tasmania. All they announced was a $5 million package. Quite rightly, the response from Tasmania's tourism industry and wider community was scathing, Mr Deputy Speaker. It could be best summed by a tweet from Tourism Industry Council CEO Luke Martin, who had never been so overwhelmed since Hangover 3, and also described it as a disappointing and lightweight commitment. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Coalition's failures in tourism infrastructure in Braddon also extend to our main arterial roads. The Bass Highway runs from Marrowa all the way through Braddon to Latrobe, continuing through Lyons and finishes in Launceston in the electorate of Bass. Under the Coalition's last 3 budgets, not a single cent has been allocated to any work on the Bass Highway in Braddon. From Burnie to Launceston is classified as part of the National Highway. This part of highway carries the largest volumes of freight of any road in Tasmania. At Devonport, the road is the vehicle gateway for Tasmania's tourism industry for those arriving on the Spirit of Tasmania. West of Burnie to Marrowa, the road has other classifications, but over the years it has seen massive increase in freight volumes. I launched a community petition earlier this year in Circular Head highlighting the state of the road, especially from Smithton to Marrowa. In a matter of weeks, the petition gathered overwhelming community support, and it was clear that this was a very high issue for the people of this area. For Labor's part, and with the support of Shadow Minister Anthony Albanese, I was able to secure a funding commitment to invest in this part of the highway. I was hoping the strength of the petition and the voices of the community would jar the Coalition into action. Sadly, I was mistaken. The campaign to fix this section of road continues in Circular Head. Local bus operator Kimbra Wells from Wells Wagons and the Circular Head Community Road Safety Committee have been proactive in allowing people to understand the dangers of travelling on this section of road and to give people a chance to experience what is at times a treacherous journey for school kids on the buses. The road is narrow, there's been significant increases in heavy vehicles, milk tankers and log trucks, as well as tourist drivers who may not be familiar with the challenges of this part of the road. Not only that, the road requires significant re-engineering at the Braddon Swamp intersection. Braddon Swamp section. I want to put on the record my thanks to Kimbra and the committee for continuing to raise this important issue. At Latrobe on the highway, local service station proprietor Ian Daggy Hartnett and his wife Trudy gathered over 2,000 signatures on a petition calling for dangerous intersections to be fixed. Now, this is a single-lane highway that has the largest volume of traffic, with trucks and cars turning into their petrol station with other vehicles nowhere to go. The near misses, the accidents, it is a scary piece of road. I am pleased Federal Labor was able to respond through Shadow Minister Albanese and allocate funding for the necessary planning works. For reasons best known to them, the Coalition also ignored this section of road. I congratulate Daggy and Trudy for their work and want to assure them that Labor will continue the fight on their behalf. So it is little wonder the people of Tasmania and Braddon rejected the Coalition at the July 2nd election. There is no doubt the Coalition's budget decisions were at the core of this rejection, along with the failure of the so-called amigos to listen to their communities. A budget that contained tax cuts to millionaires and big business, but a budget that failed the sick, elderly, vulnerable families, our children and job-creating infrastructure. Thank you.